like a paradise which we have made known to them. Now, in this ayah, the ayah that we mentioned beginning at the beginning, there is an issue important issue related to a matter of creed, which is Allah's knowledge, Allah's ilm. And the Shaykh goes on to explain this. He says, وَقَوْلُهُ عَزَّ وَجَلْ حَتَّى نَعْلَمَ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ. Because Allah said in the ayah that we shall test you until we know those who strive and are patient. The Shaykh says that someone might think that, does this mean that Allah's knowledge was deficient? How can Allah say that we shall test them until we know who is patient, who strives and who is patient? This would imply that Allah doesn't know that beforehand. So why did Allah Azza wa Jal say this? And we know already from the Quran that Allah Azza wa Jal already knows everything. Alam ta'lam anna Allah ya'lamu ma fi as-sama'i wal ard, inna dhalika fi kitab, inna dhalika 'ala Allahi yasir. Do you not know that Allah knows everything in the heaven, what is in the heaven, what is in the earth? Indeed, that is in a book. Indeed, that is easy for Allah. So how can Allah Azza wa Jal say therefore that we will test you until we know those who strive and are patient among you? And so the Sheikh says, he goes on to explain what this means. So the first point he mentions here is, first thing we should understand is that anyone who claims and says that Allah Azza wa Jal does not know something before it happens, then this person is rejecting this ayah. Right? Allah knows everything that is going to happen. Allah knows all things before they're going to happen, right? By way of this ayah and similar ayat. And anyone who denies this, then he is rejecting this ayah. This ayah proves Allah knows things before they occur. There was a group of people early on, in the early part of Islam, in the time of the companions. They began to say, they came from Iraq, and they began to say that Allah does not know of events or the what the servants are going to do until after they've done them. Allah has no prior knowledge of the actions of the servants until after they do them. This is kufr to say this. This is disbelief to say this. But the reason why they said this is because they were influenced by foreign nations and other people whom they had been speaking with and debating with, like the Christians and others, because they, before Islam, they had erred and become misguided in this issue of al-qadr. They said, if Allah knows the actions of the servants and what they are going to do beforehand, how then can he reward them and how then can he punish them? So therefore it would be injustice, it would be unjust. So therefore it must be the case that although Allah has power over other things, he does not actually have power and knowledge, prior knowledge of the actions of the servants. So when the servant does them, then he knows of them, and then he will reward and then he will punish. But this is disbelief to say this, to claim that Allah Azza wa Jal does not know the actions of the servants before they happen. This ayah is a refutation of that. Allah knows very clearly. It mentions in the ayah, inna dhalika fi kitab. Everything is written in the book. Indeed, that is easy for Allah. However, so if this is the case, Allah has knowledge of everything before it's going to happen, then what is this verse referring to then? And how do we explain this verse when Allah says, so that Allah knows those who strive and those who are patient? What is the meaning? The Sheikh says that, the Sheikh goes on to explain two explanations. There are two ways to explain this. The first one is, the Sheikh goes on to say that حتى نعلم المجاهدين هو العلم الذي يترتب عليه الثواب أو العقاب وذلك لأن علم الله بالشيء قبل أن يكون لا يترتب عليه شيء من جهة فعل العبد. Okay, the first point the Sheikh is mentioning here is that the knowledge being referred to here. In fact, let's go back a bit. Let's go back a bit. So Allah knows the actions of the servants before they were created, right? Allah knows what each one of us is going to do, right? Before He even created us, right? So this is in the ilm of Allah. Now, if Allah was to, so what we find is that Allah's reward and punishment is not on the basis of that prior knowledge. Do you understand? Right? What we mean by this is that Allah is not going to punish or reward any one of us just on account of His prior knowledge of what we are going to do when we are created, right? Because then this would be, you know, this would be, then Allah is judging us by His prior knowledge, not by our actions and the deeds that we've actually done, right? So this is the ilm of Allah, right? But then when we are created and we do the deeds, and Allah then knows that we have done the deeds, so this one is a sinful person, this one is a righteous person, this is a person of disbelief or a person of shirk, this one is a person of tawheed and iman. And so He knows that in relation to everybody, that this is what the deeds that the servant has done. Then that knowledge, Allah, it is that knowledge that is being referred to in this ayah, right? Meaning the knowledge by which a person, by which reward or punishment results from that knowledge, right? So it's not the prior knowledge before we are created and before we do any deeds, right? It's the knowledge, and in fact, this is similar to the second, is to the because the second explanation is similar as well. And the second explanation is that there is Allah's knowledge prior to a thing, then there's Allah's knowledge that it's actually happened, right? So, for example, Allah knows 50,000 years before He created the creation, He knows all the decrees, right? That this and this and this is going to happen. So, in His knowledge, it is that it is sayakun, it's going to be. Then, when that thing actually happens, it's in the knowledge of Allah that it was can, that it's happened, right? That is now in the knowledge of Allah that it has happened, right? So when Allah says in this ayah, حتى نعلم المجاهدين منكم والصابرين, right? It refers to this type of knowledge, right? So that Allah knows the one who's actually shown patience and the one who has, striven in His path. He already knew it, that it was going to happen. Now He knows it has happened. Do you understand? This it has to be like this, otherwise there would be deficiency in Allah's creation, in Allah's attributes. There would be deficiency in Allah's attributes of knowledge in relation to His creation, right? So Allah knows everything before it's going to happen. Then when it happens, it is in His knowledge that it has happened, right? This is something that the people of Kalam, like the Ash'aris and Maturidis, this is something that they try to deny, because they believe wrongly that this somehow implies that Allah is deficient and change has to happen in His essence. Right? This is what they're trying to deny, right? Because they're trying to avoid ascribing what they call change to Allah, right? This they are getting from Greek philosophy, Aristotle and whatever, right? But then if you ask them, um, you know, um, did Allah Azza wa Jal know that you were going to be born before you were going to be born? the Ash'arian, mutakallim will say, well, yes, he knew that beforehand. Okay, then you tell him, okay, so then when your mother gave birth to you on that day, did Allah know that your mother had given birth to you? Was it in His knowledge that this has now happened? And they have to say yes. Right? But this is something they are trying to avoid, because to them it implies a change in Allah's knowledge. But this leads into other problems. It leads into other problems. So the point being, in this ayah, how do we understand this ayah? This verse does not mean that Allah did not know things before they were going to happen. It doesn't mean that. So here the Shaykh says, رحمه الله, وقال بعض أهل العلم المراد بقوله حتى نعلم المجاهدين أي علم ظهور، يعني حتى يظهر الشيء. So this knowledge being referred to here is ilm of the dhuhur, meaning of the thing becoming manifest and occurring. So he says حتى يظهر الشيء لأن علم الله بالشيء قبل أن يكون علم بأنه سيكون، وعلمه بعد كونه علم بأنه كان، وفرق بين العلمين. This is because Allah's knowledge of a thing before it occurs is knowledge that it is going to occur, and His knowledge after it has occurred is knowledge that it was. And there's a difference between the two types of knowledge. فالعلم الأول علم بأنه سيكون، والثاني علم بأنه كان. Right, so the first knowledge is knowledge that it is going to happen, and the second knowledge that it is already happened. And the Sheikh goes on to give an example. He says, even if someone came to you and said that I'm going to do such and such tomorrow, so now it's in your knowledge that he is going to do such and such tomorrow. Then tomorrow, when he's done that thing, it is now in your knowledge that he has done that thing. So this second knowledge is other than the first knowledge, right? Because the thing has happened and become manifest and become apparent. So the Sheikh goes on to say, therefore, we have two kind of interpretations. They are kind of similar as to what this means when Allah says that we will test you until, so that we know those who strive amongst you and those who are patient. Allah already knows who is the one who is going to strive and who is the one who is going to be patient. Allah already knows that. So it's not that Allah does not know that. But then what this is referring to is that when those servants for whom it is decreed that they will be patient and they will strive, when they do that, when they do those deeds, it is now in Allah's knowledge that they have done those deeds. And likewise, for those who didn't do those deeds, it is in Allah's knowledge that they did not do those deeds, right? So this in no way implies that Allah does not know a thing before it happens. And this would be some of the verses that you find that the Mu'tazila, the Qadariyah, they would use these types of ambiguous verses in order to justify their false belief that Allah does not know the actions of the servants until after they happen. And this is not true. So the Shaykh then goes on to summarize once again the two meanings. The first angle is what is meant by knowledge is that knowledge on account of which reward and punishment results. And this only happens after the tribulation, after a person has been put to trial. And the second angle that we explain the verse is that this knowledge here is referring to ilm al-dhuhur, meaning knowledge, the knowledge of Allah, that something has happened and taken place, which is other than His knowledge that it is going to take place, right? So with these two angles, then this is how we explain that particular ayah. The next part of the verse, وَقَوْلُهُ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ, al-mujahid